请乘客们全程佩戴口罩。
I'm so late.
To the historical exhibition. I don't know, have you ever visited before? But I will give you a brief introduction about the Memorial Hall, and we can take some photos at the Peace Park. And because you guys, see you. So after this event, I don't know if you guys have noticed, in the city of Nanjing, you can see a lot of purple flowers, and also you can see your bed here. That purple grass is called Jinzao. It's like the peace symbol for the Memorial Hall. And after this, I'm trying to organizing this. It's like an activity on the theme of hiking. It's called the spring hike, and we will be starting from the Peace Park of the Memorial Hall, and we will go to visit John Robbie Memorial Hall, and also some other places with some historical meaning. And we will all go back to the Peace Park, and all of us will plant a peace tree together. So right now it's intended, so you can see the temperature is getting high. It's getting high and high. So I'm just waiting for the right moment for the purple flower to blossom. And it will also be in the weekend. And I will talk to Mrs. Chu, and if you guys are available, please come and join me, okay?
部分的历史，每一次在纪念馆参与
讲解、引导、演出等志愿服务，我们用最。
好，谢谢大家。
And she was severely injured on her shoulder. You can see the scars here. You can come closer. You can see the scar on her right shoulder. And this caused her, you can touch it, yes. And this caused that she could no longer lift up her left arm for the rest of her life. Yeah, in 1937, she was only 7 years old. And another statue over there, just now you can see, that's and in 1937, when Nanjing Massacre happened, she was 9 years old, and as you can see, she was severely injured on her right knee. Yes, and you can see that this injury caused the damage for her right leg for the rest of her life. Yes. So So we are now setting the statues here. It's like they are still telling her atrocities to the visitors from different countries and regions. Everyone. I have met you for the very first time, and it's my great honor to see you come to China, come to Nanjing for your study. And in the next year, during the time when you are staying in Nanjing, I will organize several activities, and I hope that you will be able to join me, okay? Just now, this morning, I was talking to you. In this month, we will go on the spring hike. So it also will be on the weekend. So by that time, if you are available, please come to me and we will go on the spring hike together. And as you can see, we are now at the historical exhibition of Nanjing Massacre. And in front of you, you can see that the theme of the exhibition has been engraved in 3 languages, Chinese, English, and Japanese. The black wall with the white characters symbolize that the history of Nanjing Massacre, it is set in stone, and it can never be denied or distorted by anyone. And during the following progress, I'm going to introduce more detailed information to you. So over here on the left side, you can see that this is a very large archival box, and on this archival box, this is a very large archival wall, and on this archival wall, we have displayed over 10,000 boxes of archives here. And as you can see, we have labeled them by different colors. The blue ones are those of the survivors, and the black ones are those of the victims. Here in the middle, you can see these are the third-party witnesses, including Mr. John Rabe, Mr. John McGee, Mrs. Minnie vautrin, and these are the foreigners who stayed in Nanjing and established the Nanjing International Safety Zone. Meanwhile, you can see some of the archives keeping a diary about how they occupied the Chinese cities one by one. Then fading are the names of the victims during Nanjing Massacre. You can see their names go up and then fade away in the sky, like a life is lost or a life was killed by the Japanese invaders. And now we will go to the entry hall. See that we have labeled the 30 original bricks from Nanjing Ming dynasty. It is suggested for you to try to go to climb the city gate in Nanjing, because they have embraced over 600 years of history. And we have labeled them here, and altogether the city gate here. Just now we have mentioned that in the city of Nanjing there are one city gate. Is that we have engraved an original brick from Nanjing Ming dynasty, and I want to introduce some detailed information to you about the bricks here. So could you please come? I don't know if you can notice, we have engraved a lot of Chinese characters on the brick. Okay, you can feel, you can try to touch it. This is actually the original break from Nanjing dynasty, which has embraced the 600-year-old history. And back 600 years ago, Emperor Zhu he set Nanjing to be the capital city of his emperor of his dynasty, Ming dynasty. And in order to, back then, Nanjing was selected to be the capital city of Ming dynasty. And in order to protect the dynasty, he required all of the workers from different provinces in the country to get involved in producing the bricks to build up the city gate to protect his capital city. And as you can see that the Chinese characters, that's Ganzhou Fu, meaning Ganzhou city in Jiangxi province. And down here, Liu Shinan, that is the name of the worker who was in charge of producing this brick. So we have to put our imagination back to 600 years ago. Actually, the emperor required all of the people who was in charge of producing the bricks should engrave his detailed information on the brick, so that if someday something went wrong with the brick, the emperor could track down to see who should take the responsibility. And this is actually a very clever way to make sure that these products are of wonderful quality. But when the Japanese invaders tried to occupy the city of Nanjing in 1937, these solid bricks back to 600 years ago could no longer defend the citizens in the city anymore. So we are now engraving the city brick here as a clever way, as a contrast between the Industrial Revolution represented by the Japanese government and the lagging behind of the agricultural revolution of the Chinese government. Yes. Officially come to the very first section of the Memorial Hall. This is the part about the basic situation before December 13th, 1937, when Nanjing was occupied by the Japanese invaders. And we know that Japan is a small country with very scarce natural resources. On the other hand, China was a large country with abundant natural resources, and that is why China became its target. The 13th, 1937, the Battle of Shanghai broke out. See, before the Battle of Shanghai, the Japanese invaders, they were intended to occupy the whole region of China within 3 months, but the Chinese defenders were brave enough to fight back, so it took the Japanese invaders over 3 months to just occupy the area in Shanghai. And we need to know that in 1937, Nanjing was the capital city of the Republic of China, and we know that Beijing is now the capital city of China, right? But 86 years ago, Nanjing was the capital city. So the Japanese invaders, after they occupy Nanjing, the capital city, as a way to show off their military strength. And now in front of you can see that this is a scene duplicated from a historical photo depicting the city of Nanjing, which used to be the capital city of the Republic of China, which used to be very famous and prosperous and wealthy. But after Nanjing, after the Japanese invaders started the air raids above the city of Nanjing on August 15th, 1937, the once prosperous city was in completely ruin and in chaos. So the undifferentiated air raids above the city of Nanjing lasted for over 4 months. After the air raids, about 40% of the residents fled away from the city. And as we have talked before, after Shanghai was occupied, the Japanese invaders, they were marching very quickly from Shanghai to Nanjing, then the capital city of the Republic of China. And I want to introduce this dynamic map here. Now let's all take a look at this dynamic map. So here we can see this is a map about the Battle of Nanjing. As we can see from the map here, so the Japanese invaders, they were marching from Shanghai to Nanjing from 3 different directions. So Nanjing is a city with a very special location. So we can see from the map here, it's been surrounded by mountains from 3 sides, while on another side, you can see the blue ones. That's actually the Yangtze River, Changjiang. Before the Battle of Nanjing, in order to show the strong determination to fight against the Japanese invaders, the Chinese defenders, they burned all of the boats along the Yangtze River side as a way to show that they're going to leave them no way to retreat. But as we also know that there existed huge military disparity between the Chinese and the Japanese military strength. And after the beginning of the Battle of Nanjing, the Chinese defenders, they've got no way but to retreat and retreat and retreat. And finally, when they arrived at the Yangtze River bank, there's no way for them to retreat anymore. To make conditions worse, there were no boats for them to use to get across the river. And that is why a large number of the Chinese defenders gave up on their weapon, and all of them were executed by the Japanese invaders. I'm going to introduce more detailed information to you in the next section. For, as we have mentioned, that there existed huge military disparity between the two sides, and we can see that on December 12, 1937, the headquarters of KMT issued the order to retreat. And on the second day, which is on December 13th, 1937, most of the city gates in the city of Nanjing were occupied by the Japanese invaders. And that is why we say on December 13th, 1937, Nanjing fell. And I want to introduce this very special piece of newspaper here, and we can all try to get a little bit close to it. So you can see this is actually a piece of newspaper back then, which is published back in Japan. You can see the title of this piece of newspaper, that's Nanjing Xianluo, meaning Nanjing fell, right? Okay, so there's a very special site here. We can all take a look at the right side. Here, that's 12月, meaning December. And here, it was supposed to show the date, but it was blank. That means the Japanese journalists, they had already prepared this piece of newspaper before December 13th when Nanjing actually fell. They knew that they're going to occupy the city, so they prepared this piece of newspaper in advance to celebrate. And down here, over there, we can see another piece of newspaper which is also published back in Japan. We can see that the title was also Nanjing Xianluo, and that is a Japanese national flag being raised at the city gate of Nanjing. Please follow me to the next section here. This is about the Japanese atrocities in the city of Nanjing. So after Nanjing was occupied, the Japanese invaders, they implemented the policy called eliminating all the prisoners, which is obviously against the international rule. You can see these are all the photos of the Chinese defender who have already given up on their weapon, but all of them would be executed near Mufu Mountain, Xixia Mountain, etc. And before Nanjing was occupied, in order to protect all, as we have mentioned before, including Mr. John Rabin, Mr. John McGee, Mrs. Minnie vautrin, Mr. Singberg, these foreigners, they stayed in Nanjing and they suggested the establishment of the Nanjing International Safety Zone. So in order to show the support for the foreigners for establishing the safety zone, the municipal government of Nanjing appointed 400 Chinese policemen to protect the safety zone. However, after Nanjing was occupied, even the Chinese policemen in the Nanjing International Safety Zone were killed by the Japanese invaders. Up here we can see this photo. This is Wu Changde, and he was one of the 400 Chinese policemen in the safety zone. On December 15, 1937, together with over 1,000 Chinese refugees, Wu Changde, they were all captured and they were taken from Xinjiekou to Qinhuai Riverside outside Hanzhong Gate to be executed. When the bullet ran out, Mr. Wu Changde quickly fell down on the ground. But when the Japanese invaders tried to finish the collective massacre, he was severely injured on his back. And Mr. Wu Changde became the only survivor among all the 400 Chinese policemen. He was the only survivor. And he testified after the Japanese government surrendered on August 15, 1946. And here we can see this large black box. And in the black box, we can see these are the original remains of the bodies during the Nanjing Massacre. Everyone, you can see that this is actually the original remains of the bodies from Nanjing Massacre, and we discovered them in 2004. That's the year when the memorial hall was doing the third phase of reconstruction. So we're not, these remains are not found in another city. This way, please. Okay, now to the opposite of the black box, you can see this is a diagram showing all the sites where the Japanese soldiers finished the collective massacre, and each of the sites is marked by a bullet. You can see see a lot of bullets in the whole city of Nanjing. We are now right here. You can see this is the Zhangdong Gate Collective Massacre. We are now here. The memorial hall was established here. And here you can see this green section here. This is actually the Nanjing International Safety Zone that we mentioned before. But even it's called safety zone, we can see several bullets in here, right? That means the safety zone is not safe. The Japanese soldiers can still go into the safety zone and kill as they want. In front of us, this is a very large oil painting, and we can divide this oil painting into 3 parts. You can see on the left side, 2 Japanese invaders. They were looking at the Chinese bodies, Chinese victims' bodies indifferently. They represent slaughter. In the middle, a boy is crying on his stepmother's body. He represents rebirth. On the right side, you can see a monk is carrying an old man's body. He represents Buddha. So the whole title of this oil painting was Slaughter, Rebirth, Buddha, Nanjing Massacre. On December 14th, 1937, you can see the title of this piece of newspaper was 百人斩首记录, translating into English as The Record of Killing 100. 2 Japanese invaders, they started a very barbaric killing race to see which one would be the first one to kill 100 Chinese people. By the time they arrived in the city of Nanjing, one had killed 106, the other had killed 105. But there's no way for them to identify which one of them reached the number 100 first. So they restarted the killing race to see which one would be the first one to kill 150 Chinese people. You see, this piece of newspaper, it was hugely popular back then in Japan. The diagram on the side where the Japanese soldiers massacre, right? So, a background information, a collective massacre side would be a side where the Japanese soldiers killed over 10,000 Chinese people. That would be called a collective side. And here we can see in front of us, we can see a lot of jars, and in each of the jar are the original dirt from all the 20 places in the city of Nanjing where the Japanese soldiers finished the collective massacre. And this is the dirt from that place. Yes. So we are now at part 4. This is the part about the humanitarian aid. During Nanjing Massacre, about 20 foreigners stayed in Nanjing and established the Nanjing International Safety Zone. You can see their photos here. Mr. John Rabe, a German, he was elected to be the president of the Nanjing International Safety Zone. Together with over 20 foreigners, they established 25 refugee camps and protected over 200,000 Chinese refugees. Here we can see, this is Mr. John Rabe, the president of Nanjing International Safety Zone. During Nanjing Massacre, Mr. John Rabe, he used his residence as a refugee camp and protected over 600 Chinese refugees and a 2-story building. He was seen as a living Buddha by the Chinese refugees. And now you can see in front of you, you can see the tombstone of Mr. John Rabe and his wife, Mrs. Dora Rabe. And on the tomb, I don't know if you guys can notice, there's a symbol with a lot of Chinese flavor on it. Could you please point it to me up there? Can you see the Tai Chi symbol? Yes, thank you. Thank you. You can see here on Mr. John Rabe's tombstone, you can see the Tai Chi symbol here. Mr. John Rabe, he favored Chinese culture a lot, and that is why he required to engrave the Tai Chi symbol on his tomb as a way to show his affection for China as well as for Nanjing. The statue here is in charge of Jinling College. This is Mrs. Minnie vautrin, and during Nanjing Massacre, she was in charge of Jinling College, now known as Nanjing Normal University. And during Nanjing Massacre, Jinling College became a very important shelter and protected over 10,000 women and children. But very unfortunately, Mrs. Minnie vautrin, she suffered from severe depression during Nanjing Massacre, and within just 1 year when she came back to the United States, she committed suicide. And before she passed away, she left a note saying that if I got a second chance, I would still stay in Nanjing and protected the refugees in the city of Nanjing. And see another statue. During Nanjing Massacre, he used his 60mm camera and secretly taped the Japanese atrocities in the city of Nanjing, and they became very important evidence in the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, also known as Tokyo Court. Because the video that he took was the only dynamic in the motion of dynamics, so they were really valuable. The Japanese made those atrocities, shocked the whole world. And after the war, after the Japanese suffered, finally surrendered on August 15th, 1945. Two international courts were established. The first one was established in Tokyo, Japan. It's called the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, also known as Tokyo Court. Judges from 11 countries sentenced 28 Class A Japanese criminals to death. That the Chinese judge is the main role. And foreigners, they all testified at the Tokyo Court, including Robert Wilson. Dr. Robert Wilson was the only surgeon stayed in Nanjing during Nanjing Massacre. He was working at John Howard Hospital, and because he was the only surgeon who could perform operations, so he had to take quite harsh job. Within just 1 day, on December 19th, he performed over 20 operations until December 23. He had to over 200 patients were waiting for him to perform operations, and he became. He said that. Actually, he was born in Nanjing and raised up in Nanjing. And after the war, she came back to the United States until 1942. She came back to the United States. And Mr. John McGee, the American missionary who used his camera and secretly taped the Japanese atrocities, and the American professor from Jilin College, Minor Bates, they all testified at the Tokyo Court, and also Wu Changde, the Chinese policeman from the Nanjing International Safety Zone, he also testified at Tokyo Court. And 1 month later, on February 15, 1946, the Nanjing War Crimes Tribunal was established in Nanjing. And since this court was established in the city where Nanjing Massacre happened, so it gave an rather accurate number about the victims. We can see, according to the Nanjing War Crimes Tribunal, the number of the victims exceeded 300,000. And remember the 2 Japanese lieutenants who started the very barbaric killing race? Yes, you can see they were all brought to Nanjing at the Nanjing War Crimes Tribunal, and they were sentenced to death in 1948. In 1948 at Yuhua Gate. And up here, we can see this photo here. Just now, during the ceremony, we also saw the monument. That's the American Chinese writer, Mrs. Iris Chang, and her Chinese name was Zhang Chunru. In 1997, Mrs. Iris Chang wrote a very famous book in English called The Forgotten Holocaust. The Forgotten Holocaust, the Rape of Nanjing. And because it's the very first book to tell the people in Western countries about the rape of Nanking, and she made quite a great contribution to spreading the historical facts to people, especially in Western countries. However, like Mrs. Minnie vautrin, Iris Chang also suffered from severe depression, and she committed suicide in 2004 when she was only 36 years old. Up here, you can see 8 large Chinese characters, 前事不忘，后事之师, translating into English. distinguished as the remembrance of the past could be the teacher for the future. It was put forward by the former Chinese premier in 1972. That is the year when China and Japan formed a formal diplomatic relationship. So that's the basic introduction for the historical exhibition. I now have a favor to ask you to see that's the section where we invite audiences to write some remarks after visiting. So is it okay to ask some of you to write some remarks?